Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to explore generative AI? You guys sent some really interesting stuff over, so I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah, we've got research papers, articles, even some opinions from some of the big names in the field.
Cool. Generative AI, everyone's talking about it, ChatGPT, DALL-E.
Right.
It's more than just a buzzword, though, right? This tech could really change things in medicine, education, even art.
Definitely. Actually, one of the sources, a study from Stanford, goes into how generative AI could change medical imaging.
Oh, wow.
They're finding that AI can actually see patterns in scans that humans often miss.
That's incredible. So does that mean we could diagnose diseases much earlier?
Exactly. And early detection can make a huge difference.
Right.
This study found that using AI to look at medical images was way more accurate and faster,
Especially for things like cancer, I imagine.
especially for things like cancer. Yep.
That's huge. Okay, what about education? What about those AI tutors I keep hearing about? What makes them so different from like an online course?
Well, think about it. An online course is kind of like one size fits all, right?
Right.
But an AI tutor can actually adapt to how you learn best and at your own pace.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, one of the articles talks about this pilot program using AI tutors in high schools.
Okay.
They found that the students who used the AI tutors not only understood the material better, but they also felt more confident and like they were actually enjoying learning.
Wow. So it's not just about getting answers, it's about making learning fun.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
It is, and that's something that comes up a lot in these sources, this idea that generative AI could make our experiences more personalized.
Makes sense.
Like in the art world, think about tools like DALL-E.
Yeah, I played with DALL-E a bit. It's kind of mind-blowing, seeing it create these images just from a few words.
Right.
Do you think this kind of tech could make art accessible to everyone?
That's exactly what one of the sources argues.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's this essay by this well-known artist, and they believe that tools like DALL-E can give anyone the power to express themselves creatively.
Even if they don't have like traditional art skills.
Exactly.
I like it. It's like AI is becoming a partner in creativity.
And that brings up some pretty big questions about authorship and originality, which we'll definitely talk about more later.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear more about that. But before we move on, we've talked about medicine, education, art. What about software development? How's this tech changing things for programmers?
Well, coding can take forever.
Oh, tell me about it.
Generative AI could potentially do a lot of those repetitive tasks for us.
Interesting.
One research paper we have looks at how AI can analyze code, suggest how to make it better, even write entire sections of code based on what you need it to do.
So it's like having an AI assistant that codes for you.
Well, almost.
Yeah,
The paper does say this technology is still pretty new.
right.
But just imagine, you could focus on the more creative parts of software development and let AI handle the boring stuff.
That would be a game changer. But of course, there's always two sides to every coin, right?
Exactly.
What are some of the concerns that come up in these sources?
One big worry is that jobs might start disappearing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As AI gets better, it could automate tasks that people are doing right now.
I was just reading an article about how AI is being used to write marketing copy now, and it's really impressive. But
Right.
it did make me wonder, what does that mean for copywriters?
Yeah, and that's a valid concern. But I think it's important to remember that technology has always changed the job market.
True.
What we need to do is figure out how to adapt.
Right. How do we navigate this new landscape? Do the sources offer any insights into that?
Several of them actually talk about the importance of reskilling and upskilling.
Okay.
The jobs that AI is most likely to replace are usually the ones that involve a lot of repetition. So focusing on developing skills that need creativity, critical thinking, and complex problem solving is going to be crucial.
That makes sense. We need to think about what skills will be valuable in the future with all this AI.
Exactly.
Do the sources give any specific examples of new jobs that might pop up?
One source, a report from the World Economic Forum, actually predicts a big demand for roles like AI trainers, data analysts, and AI ethicists.
Interesting.
These are jobs that require a deep understanding of AI and what it all means.
So it's like a whole new field is opening up.
Exactly.
It sounds like we also need to think carefully about the ethics of all this.
We do, yep. A lot of the sources talk about the potential for bias in AI systems
Oh, right.
and how we need careful oversight and regulation.
Because if AI is going to be making decisions that impact us,
Yeah.
we need to make sure those decisions are fair.
Exactly. And there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
It's definitely something we'll keep discussing in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, can't wait. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the impact of AI and like the future of work, But before we get too far into that, I'm curious about the tech itself. How do these AI systems actually work? It all seems kind of like magic sometimes.
It is complex, but it's not magic.
Okay.
At the core of it, you have these things called neural networks.
Neural networks.
Yeah, basically algorithms that try to mimic the way the human brain learns.
So they're like digital brains?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
These networks are trained on huge data sets of text, images, code, you name it.
Wow.
And through all that training, they learn to see patterns and relationships in the data.
Okay.
Actually, one of the research papers you sent breaks down how these networks are trained using something called deep learning.
Deep learning, I've heard of that. That's part of machine learning, right?
Exactly. It's basically training these neural networks with multiple layers, and that lets them learn these really complex representations of the data.
Hmm.
More layers, deeper the network, more sophisticated it gets.
Wow. So when I'm typing something into ChatGPT, it's using this deep learning to figure out what words should come next.
Yeah, and same with DALL-E. When it's making an image, you give it a description, and it uses its knowledge of visual patterns to create something new.
It's crazy how much this technology has changed in such a short amount of time. I read in one of these articles that, like, a few years ago, AI couldn't even create a realistic picture of a cat.
Right.
And now AI is creating art that's winning awards.
It really is incredible how fast things are progressing. One of the sources, a report from a leading AI research lab, says we'll see even bigger changes in the next few years, especially with new types of neural networks like GANs and
Game
transformers.
bands and transformers, what are those?
GANs are generative adversarial networks.
Okay.
They're really interested. They actually use two neural networks that work together.
Oh, wow.
One creates content and the other one acts as a discriminator, and it's trying to tell the difference between the real content and the stuff the AI generated.
So they're like competing, and that
Yeah.
makes them both better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why GANs are so powerful. They're constantly learning and improving.
Hmm.
Transformers are another type of neural network that's becoming really important in generative AI. They're really good at understanding sequential data, like text or music.
So are these different types of neural networks better for specific tasks?
Yeah, like GANs are often used for image generation, while transformers are great for things like language translation or summarizing text.
So the possibilities are pretty much endless.
That's what's so cool about this field. But we got to remember that with any powerful technology, there can be downsides.
Right.
One of the sources, a paper by a group of AI ethicists, brought up some concerns about misuse.
Like what kind of misuse? Are we talking deepfakes?
Deepfakes are a big one.
Yeah.
They use generative AI to create these videos or audio recordings that look and sound totally real but are completely fake.
Yeah, that's a little scary.
It could be used to spread misinformation, manipulate people, even damage someone's reputation.
Is anyone trying to do anything about that?
A lot of our sources talk about the work being done to develop tools that can spot deepfakes.
Okay.
Researchers are making algorithms that can look at videos and audio and tell if they've been manipulated.
It sounds like a constant battle then, as the tech to make deepfakes gets better. So does the tech to detect them.
It is.
Mhm.
It's a game of cat and mouse, but it really shows how important critical thinking is these days.
Absolutely.
We have to be aware of the possibility of manipulation and be careful about what we see and share online.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but how we choose to use it.
Exactly. One of the sources, it's a book by a tech journalist, says that we need to have serious conversations about the ethics of generative AI.
So what are some of the big ethical questions that come up in these sources?
Well, one that we see a lot is transparency. How do we make sure that people know when they're interacting with AI? Should there be some kind of label or disclosure?
Right, so if I'm reading an article or watching a video, I should know if it was made by a person or an AI. What about the data that these AI systems are trained on? Where's it coming from? Who owns it?
Those are all huge questions. One of the articles goes into the whole debate about copyright and intellectual property rights with generative AI.
Right.
If AI is trained on copyrighted stuff, who owns the rights to what it creates?
Yeah, that's really complicated. It seems like we're just starting to figure all of this out.
We are, and these are conversations we need to be having now, not later. We got to be proactive about how this technology is developed and used in a way that aligns with our values.
It's a lot to consider. I can definitely see why people are excited and kind of nervous about this whole AI thing.
It's understandable this tech has the power to change so many parts of our lives,
For sure.
but it also raises these big questions about what it means to be human in a world that's getting more and more digital.
Those are definitely questions we need to think about. But I also want to talk about the practical side of all of this. How is this going to affect our day-to-day
Well,
lives?
one area where we're already seeing big changes is in customer service.
Right.
Lots of companies are using AI-powered chatbots to handle basic questions and tasks.
Yeah, I've talked to a few of those.
Right.
Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes not so much.
Yeah. But the tech is still being developed. But imagine a chatbot that can actually understand what you need and what you like, can predict your questions, and give you really personalized service.
That would be so helpful. What about other areas like healthcare or education?
We talked about some of those possibilities earlier, like in healthcare, AI can be used to analyze medical data and help doctors make diagnoses.
Yeah.
And in education, it can be used to create customized learning experiences and give students feedback in real time.
It sounds like generative AI is going to be everywhere in the next few years.
It'll definitely have a big impact, and we haven't even begun to see everything it can do.
Okay, before we move on, I think it'd be good to go back and recap some of the key things we've talked about.
Good idea. It's easy to get lost in all the details.
Okay, so we started with how these AI systems actually work. We learned about neural networks, the brains behind generative AI, and deep learning, how they're trained.
Right.
We talked about different types of neural networks like GANs and transformers and how they're making AI systems more advanced.
Right, and then we talked about some of the ethical issues with this technology, like deepfakes, the need for transparency, and the whole debate around copyright and intellectual property.
Yeah, and we talked about how this tech is already impacting our lives in things like customer service, healthcare, and education.
Exactly, and it's really just the beginning. Generative AI is still developing, but it's moving fast.
So where do we go from here? What are the big questions we should be asking as we move forward?
I think the biggest question is, how do we make sure this technology is used for good?
That's a good question.
How do we use it to solve problems in the world while also minimizing the risks?
That's a big one, but it's a good place to start.
It is. And this is a conversation that everyone needs to be a part of, not just the tech people or the politicians.
Yeah.
We all have a say in what the future of AI looks like.
Okay, so we've talked about how this tech works, we've talked about its ethics, but there's one thing we haven't really dug into yet, the future of work.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one, and it's on everyone's mind with this whole AI thing, how it could change everything.
And it seems like all our sources agree some jobs are going to be more affected than others.
Right.
Like jobs that involve a lot of repetitive tasks like data entry, basic coding, even some types of writing and design.
Yeah, there's a report that predicts that some of those tasks might be automated,
Right.
but that doesn't mean the jobs will completely go away. It's more likely that they'll just change.
Oh, okay. So instead of being replaced by AI, we might actually work alongside it.
Exactly. Like imagine a graphic designer using AI to come up with some initial ideas,
Mm.
or a writer using AI to help with research.
Right.
AI could be a tool that actually helps us do our jobs better, frees us up to focus on strategy and creative stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not us versus the machines, it's us working with them. But what about those people whose jobs are most likely to be automated? What happens to them?
That's where reskilling and upskilling come in. A lot of the sources talk about how important it is to have programs that help people learn new skills for this new job market.
So basically, we all need to become lifelong learners, always learning new things.
Pretty much one study from a big university said that the jobs of the future will need a mix of technical skills and what they call human skills.
Human skills, what's that?
Things like critical thinking, creativity, emotional intelligence, being able to solve complex problems.
Those are things that AI can't really do yet, right?
Exactly. And those are going to be the skills that are in demand as we move into this world with all this AI everywhere.
That's good to hear. So even if AI can code and write marketing copy, there's still a need for us humans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we need to make some big changes in how we think about education and training.
Yeah, for sure. One of the sources, a report from the World Economic Forum, recommends teaching kids about AI starting in school, like really young,
Yeah.
to prepare them for this future with AI everywhere.
Exactly. Give them the knowledge and skills they'll need to navigate this new world.
Makes sense. So besides education, what else can we do to make this transition easier?
Well, one futurist actually thinks we need to rethink the whole idea of work, like the traditional 9 to 5.
Okay.
They say we need to move towards a more flexible workforce where people can switch between different roles and industries easily.
So basically, we need to get comfortable with not knowing what the future holds.
Yeah, the future of work is probably going to be less about having one job your whole life and more about constantly adapting and learning new things.
That's a really good point, but it's not just about individuals changing, right? We need to think about bigger changes too.
Right. System-wide changes. Some sources talk about things like universal basic income or a shorter work week, things that could help if lots of jobs are automated.
Those are some pretty big ideas. So this whole AI thing could really change how our society works.
It could, and that's part of what makes it so interesting. It's not just about machines getting smarter. It's about us humans figuring out how to live in this new world.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's exciting, it's a little scary, but it's definitely not something we can ignore.
I agree. It's really important to be having these conversations now while we still have time to shape how AI develops and make sure it's used in a way that's good for everyone.
So what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
The future with AI is uncertain, but it's not set in stone. The choices we make now will decide what that future looks like.
That's a great point. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive into generative AI. We've covered the technology, the challenges, and all the amazing possibilities.
It's been fun, and this is really just the beginning of a much bigger conversation.
To all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has gotten you thinking the future of AI is in our hands. Let's make it a good one.